Good day, everyone. I'm Brian, moderator for this webinar. Welcome everyone for today's webinar, HIPAA Audit and Enforcement Update for 2023. HHS keep pressure on access, privacy, and security compliance. Please note you are placed in listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar. We will have a Q&A session at the end. Also, this webinar will be made available for purchase in form of DVD, e-transcript, and recorded link as the session is being recorded. I would now like to introduce our presenter for today, Jim Sheldon-Dean. Jim Sheldon-Dean is the founder and director of compliance services at Lewis Creek System, LLC, a Vermont-based consulting firm founded in 1982, provided information privacy and security regulatory compliance services to a wide variety of healthcare entities. He's a frequent speaker regarding HIPAA. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Jim.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to today's discussion looking at the issues of HIPAA going into 2023 now, and they've already been pretty busy in the world of HIPAA audits and enforcement. So we're going to find out what HHS is up to as far as they're keeping the pressure on for various enforcement activities, focusing on access for individuals and privacy and security compliance, to put it in kind of just a few words. There's a lot going on, obviously. Let's take a look at how we're going to approach this. So the idea is we're going to be looking at the various HIPAA audits and enforcement settlements, see what kind of enforcement settlements there have been, what kind of agreements people have come to, what kind of penalties have been paid. But what we're really looking for is to see what are the most prominently featured issues. What are the things that show up time and time again? And so you can see, well, if these things happen to other organizations that are in the same business I am, I suppose I ought to watch out for these problems, right? Well, so we're looking to see what kind of things have been involved with the audit process in the past, and what kind of results there have been from the past audits. As was mentioned at the beginning, I have some background in doing some. So anyway, when it comes to being prepared for either an audit from HHS or an enforcement investigation, those aren't exactly the same thing. They have a lot of the same characteristics. Now, what we're talking about today is, oh my goodness, I see I've got a typo here on this slide right here. I've changed this on a number of slides, but this is not 27 settlements so far. It's up to 43 settlements so far. The recent enforcement these days is the audits and enforcement activity has really been focusing on a couple of different kinds of things. But enforcement activity does keep going on no matter what anyway. Now, in the 2012 HIPAA audit program, it's kind of interesting, the overall numbers, if you look at the overall numbers, you can see that small covered entities were about a third of the sample, had about 2/3 of the problems. Now, in the 2016 audits, it wasn't a general end-to-end kind of review like they did in 2012 on every bit of the regulations. It was just on a few areas they wanted to focus on. And so it was also done rather than by, in-person kinds of detailed stuff. It was more done by, that was put up by the Office of Civil Rights in the 2018, was updated in 2018. We're looking at question 102 here, so you can see add the item number down the left-hand side. So as far as getting ready for the audits are concerned, the audit program can be resumed at any time, and it might be. So when you're looking for what might you be asked in an audit enforcement investigation, these are a number of links here. And that includes everybody from the CEO and HIPAA officer and systems directors on down through training directors and incident response leaders and things like that. Now, there's also more questions they ask. They start getting, not just who they want to talk with, but and other documents such as your entity-wide security plan, your risk analysis, and your risk management plan based on that. Now, the questions about a small provider breach by theft, there's another one of the links here. This is the middle one on that page of links we had there. To safeguard the facility and equipment. If somebody broke in and stole things, the electronic information should be protected. Now, we can also look at the audit protocol. Let's look at the 2018 audit protocol. A couple of questions in there. That was that big, ugly table we looked at before that had all that text on there. Well, let's look at, for instance, item 66 that I mentioned. Now, there's also item 69 just down the list a little farther, where we get to a review of denial of access. So they're one of those things that when you're denying access, now there's been some guidance on providing access that came out in 2016 for providing access that the HHS would like to actually put in the rules because it just needs to be done. Now, when it comes to release of information, so audits do ask for the history of what's been going on. They're looking to see what's going back 6 years. So you have to document every action, activity, or assessment that you do in pursuit of compliance. So what's likely for future HIPAA audits? There's no permanent plan for auditing, no new audits expected soon, but it could be resumed at any time. And what else are we talking about? Oh yeah, there may be other things coming down the pike. We have the HITECH Act calls for a portion of penalties collected to go to people who have been harmed in a breach. We're talking about enforcement actions, and we're going to be getting into penalties and things like that. 20 years pretty quickly here. So anyway, it also needs to consider business associates in this whole situation, because they are involved with some of the violations that take place. The business associates are liable for compliance only for failing to cooperate with the HHS, or taking retaliatory action, or failure to comply with the security rule. Or now, just very briefly on telemedicine, just as one aspect of communications is, it's fine to use a HIPAA-compliant, fully encrypted service for telemedicine use during the public health emergency, during COVID-19 time here. That have been put in place for the emergency situation, for the COVID-19 situation. The HIPAA penalties, as I say, these numbers have gone up since these numbers here even. Now there is the HIPAA Safe Harbor Law, various tools and technologies that are out there to help you do a good job to provide protection. We've got resolution agreements and civil money penalties. A resolution agreement is when HHS says, well, listen, we got a violation here. Here's what your penalty is going to be. And we're not going to look at each one in great detail, but there's a number of things that we can learn here. Regular procedures for audits and reviews and things like that had not designated itself as a hybrid entity. Unencrypted stolen laptops and backups, lost laptops, lack of safeguard, and the big arguments, and communicate all kinds of health information that they shouldn't. This is what's the matter with you. You knew there was a problem here, but then they would have had to have a corrective action plan. In this case, they paid 3.2. The New York City hospitals are, basically have no money. Here we have the Anthem breach, where we have the 79 million records, response on patient records. Now we're starting to get into the ones having to do with individual requests for access, okay? We have a breach via disclosure to an unknown recipient via emails, okay? So that's it looks like a limited circumstance why it's only 25,000, but it also depends on what the information is too. Now we have here we have a hacker posted PHI online. Other kinds of access termination procedures, so people were breaching information inappropriately. More of the access enforcement actions. We have 5 of them came in September of 2020. You shouldn't have to have 2 interventions by HHS. In 2021, there was there's some security actions. There was we have in 2022 we have more right of access violations. We have another poor handling of PHI and trash. Now, state attorneys general do have the ability these days to if a state attorney general feels that there's professional services company. So we go to the security enforcement lessons that we've learned. Privacy enforcement as well. Make sure you have complete policies and procedures. Typical corrective action plan that you might get if you wind up in enforcement action in your audit and breach response. Okay, so the whole idea, what we've been talking about here, look for the various issues that are identified in the prior breaches and enforcement and audit activity. So your to-do list is don't be in denial. Willful neglect is more expensive than compliance. There's no question about that. So thank you for listening. At this point, we can open up for some questions.
Thanks, Jim. That was a wonderful webinar. I think there is no further question. Right, Jim?
Okay.
So I want to get back to you for the final remarks.
Okay, well, just again, thanks everybody for listening. There's obviously a lot of things we've touched on, a lot of aspects of HIPAA compliance that we've looked at, but the idea is to approach it from kind of take an organized approach to it. It does help to look at some of the compliance tools that I've mentioned along the way, and as I've just been talking about, there's a lot of guidance. So again, thanks for listening, and please enjoy the remainder of your day.
Thanks, Jim. That is for the session. That does conclude the session for today. Thank you everyone for participating. You may all disconnect now. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye. Take care.